So one day, somebody is going to try and change your mind. They're going to try to tell you that the resurrection of Jesus Christ didn't happen. And I don't want to assume in a room this size that everybody believes that tonight either. But our hope in this series is that we could not just change your mind, but change your heart as well. So here's what I want you to do. Touch your neighbor and say, buckle up, okay? Because this series, y'all, I'm telling you, I know your parents probably don't think that you're that bright. I'm sorry to break it to you. But I think you're pretty smart. And so we're going to take you pretty quick tonight. And this series is going to get deep. But my hope is to equip you to know why you believe what you believe. And maybe some of you all, you come in here tonight with doubts, and you're going to believe that there was a man who died, who came back to life, and is God because of the evidence. So here's what I want you to do tonight. Fill in the blank here. I will believe it when I... Okay. Now, we've all heard stories before where somebody has told us, or they've told you the story and you said, man, I'm going to have to believe it until I see it. One time, I had a brother. My brother told me one time, I didn't kill him, but my brother told me one time, he was like, man, have you ever heard of this guy's name was Randy Johnson? And one day he was throwing this pitch. And he's a pitcher in Major League Baseball. He's throwing a pitch, and a bird flies across. And it doesn't just clip the bird. It hits the bird head on and explodes the bird. And he was like, bro, have you ever heard of this? And I was like, dude, that would be crazy. I mean, all of these things have to take place. Like the bird has to be like it would suck to be Big Bird that day. I'm just saying. Like the bird's got to be right here. The ball's got to be thrown at the right time. And it can't just clip the bird. It's got to hit it head on to explode it. And I said, Jonathan, I am going to have to see it to believe it. So he showed me this. Watch the screens. Bird. Ah! Call Petey, y'all, because I just showed that in church, all right? Now, it would stink to be a bird that day, I'm just saying. But that was the story that I had to believe, or I had to see to believe. Now, we've all been encountered by stories like that we would have to see in order to believe. Now, there's some things that are so crazy that are just so out there and so improbable of happening that we just need to see with our own eyes. And so here's where I need you to follow with me, because this is going to make, the whole message will make sense if you'll listen to this, okay? Here's what I want to say. We believe, okay, based upon what we have seen or based upon the person with the information, okay? Now, here's what I mean by that. What I mean by is we believe based upon what we've seen, what we've heard, what we've watched on YouTube, what we've seen on Instagram, what we have personally experienced. So the idea here is I believe because I've seen it. I believe because I was there. Or we also come to believe things based upon the person with the information. So when you're growing up and you're learning your multiplication tables, and your teacher said 3 times 9 equals 27. Some of you are like, 26. I got to win what? I'm just messing. But when somebody told them that, and 3 times 9 equals 27, you weren't like, doubt it, and then went home and got a row of 3 apples. Let's do it 9 times and count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 27. Okay, I believe her now. No, because why? You trusted the person who had the information. And so we believe based upon what we've seen with our own eyes and what the person who's telling us the information. So when it comes to the resurrection of Jesus Christ, that a man came back to life, did you see it with your own eyes? No. Do you trust your parents? Yeah, most likely. Do you trust me? I hope so. Do you trust your small group leader? Probably. So what happens, okay? And here's the tension I need you to lean in with me today. What happens when someone who's smarter than mom and dad? What happens when someone who's more trustworthy than your small group leaders? And what happens when someone more convincing than me tells you that the resurrection of Jesus Christ is just another conspiracy theory? How many of y'all like conspiracy theories? Okay? I'm fascinated by them. What happens when somebody in college tells you that the fact that Jesus Christ came back to life is just like any other conspiracy that you watch on YouTube. That the Easter events have no more proof than the Easter bunny. That Jesus being alive is about as dumb as Tupac being alive, if you know who that is. And that the resurrection is just about as verifiable as Bigfoot. It's just another conspiracy theory. What would we say to that? Because I would bet, because in your shoes right now when I was in high school, I didn't have an answer to that. Well, because I believe it. What would you say to that? When somebody who's smarter than me, who has more degrees than me, who knows more about the Bible and knows more about ancient history than me, tells you that the resurrection is a conspiracy theory, what would you do? What would you base your beliefs on? Because we haven't seen it with our own eyes. We were not there. And the college professor, more likely, is going to seem way more credible than your parents. And way more credible than me. You know what most of us in the room would do? If we're honest, we would doubt it. We would doubt it. And I believe that many of you all here tonight, you may be a Christian, but you still struggle with doubts. And so I want to do a little social experiment here, okay? And this is going to require a little bit of vulnerability. And so I'm going to explain this to you. And I don't want anybody to move until we all move together, all right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you a question. Here's how I want you to answer. What we're going to do is, in a moment, I'm going to ask everybody, this is not an invitation, all right? I'm going to ask everybody to bow their head and close their eyes. No one's looking around. It's like heads up, 7 up, okay? Wow, that was loud. All right? We're all going to put our heads down, and what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask everybody to put their phone light up in the air, their flashlight on their phone. And here's how you're going to answer. I'm going to ask you a question, okay? And if you say, yes, I do, I want you to leave your phone in the air, okay? If you're like, no, pull it down and just put it in your lap so the light's not seen, okay? So, lights go down. Everybody close their eyes, bow their heads. Nobody looking around. Respect each other's privacy, okay? I want everyone to put their phones in the air with the light on. Phones in the air with the light on, okay? Heads down, eye closed. Respect one another's privacy. Okay? If you say, I have doubts about God, I have doubts about the resurrection, I have doubts about Christianity, okay? What I want you to do is if you have those doubts, I want you to leave your phone in the air and just drop it. Drop it. If you don't have doubts, you can just put your phone down. If you have doubts, keep it up. Everybody can put their phones down. Lights, come on up. So, the overwhelming majority in the room said that they have doubts. That almost, so many of you all said, yes, I do have doubts. And we have doubts. That's just something many of us have as Christians. We have so many doubts. Why do we have our doubts? Well, here's why I think you have doubts. Because we've been told, just believe. We've heard this before. You just need to believe. Or in the South, people say, you just need to believe, brother. You just need to believe, sister. You just need to have a little more faith, brother. And while in the real world, outside of the church, we believe based upon what we've seen or the person with the information, for some reason when it comes to Christianity, we've been told just have faith. Don't look for evidence. Don't look for proof. Don't question the Bible. Just believe. If the Bible says it, that settles it. Don't think about it anymore. Believe, brother. Believe, sister. Just have a little more faith. But for this generation, what I know about you, and for your generation, just believe is just not enough. But what if there's a better way? What if it is a good thing that just believe is just not enough? Well, I believe it's a good thing, and I believe God himself lays out a better way than just believe. So today we're going to look at John chapter 20, verse 30. And today's going to be a different message. I'm going to kind of fly through parts, and it's going to be a little hefty of a message. And so I need you to kind of take some notes because we're going to go quick. And it's going to be a lot of information to process. But I want you to have more information because somebody's going to hit you with a lot of information in the mouth one day, and you're going to have doubts. So I'm going to hit you in the mouth with some information tonight, and I hope it's going to lead to some transformation in your heart. So John chapter 20, verse 30, this is at the very end of John's gospel account. So this book is written by a man named John. Now, it's not really written by him because John didn't speak Greek. And this was written in the lingua franca of the day. If you've heard that in history class, lingua franca means the most common language of the day. It wasn't Aramaic. It wasn't Hebrew. It was Greek. So what he did, he didn't know Greek. So what he decided to do is he was going to dictate this book to somebody who knew Greek and was going to write it down, and it was going to be his eyewitness account. Now, his goal in writing this book, and I'm going to show you why it's his goal here in just a second. His goal in writing the Gospel of John was to give you an eyewitness, factual account of what happened when he was following Jesus around. He wanted to give you an account of what he saw and what the other disciples saw. Before we go any further, I want to give you a little backstory on the disciples of Jesus. The first thing is this. Like I said, we're going to go fast. The first thing is this. The disciples were Jews, okay? What that means is they did not believe that Jesus was God. So before they came to faith in Jesus, they believed that there was one God, and there is, but they believed that there was one person known as Yahweh, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. But they were Jews, so they rejected Jesus before they came to faith. Jesus was just a crazy rabbi, all right? So one, the disciples were Jews. Two, the disciples believed in an unapproachable God known as Yahweh. We know this Yahweh as God the Father. Okay? So they believed in an unapproachable God known as Yahweh. You could not go up and talk to Yahweh. You couldn't come before Yahweh. When we worship, when we pray, we come and sit before and pray before and kneel before Yahweh, our God. But in Judaism, if you approached God and you went into what was called the Holy of Holies, and you approached God without being a priest or having ceremonial cleansing, you die on the spot. They would tie a rope around you so that when you went in to meet with God, and if you weren't clean and you died, they could pull you out without dying too. That's the way the Jews worked in the temple in the Old Testament. So they believed that Yahweh was an unapproachable God unless there were certain ceremonial cleansings. So they were Jews, they believed in an unapproachable God, and the core belief of Judaism comes out of Deuteronomy, that there's one God. The core belief of Judaism was that God the Creator was only worthy of worship. The Messiah wasn't worthy of worship. Jesus wasn't worthy of worship. The Holy Spirit wasn't. They weren't ghosted. They didn't believe in the Holy Spirit was worthy of worship. They believed that God, the creator of the universe, Yahweh, was solely worthy of worship. Anything else would get you stoned. Not with marijuana, with rocks. Okay? So that was the core belief of Judaism. 4. Each disciple, after they met Jesus, spent the rest of their lives spreading the gospel. The reason why we are talking about Jesus right now is because the disciple spreaded the gospel to a certain part that somehow led to us here in North America. And then number 5, everyone but John died a horrible death. So John's the only one who didn't die. He died of old age. So Peter, crucified upside down in Rome. That's verifiable fact. Andrew, crucified in Russia. Philip, arrested in North Africa and put to death. Matthew, he was stabbed to death in Ethiopia. Bartholomew dies an unknown death in Syria. James was stoned to death in Syria. Simon was killed in Persia after a refusal to worship the sun god. Mattathias was burned to death in Syria. Thaddeus was crucified by the Magi in Persia, and John escaped being boiled alive in a huge pot of water in Rome, and then he died of old age. He escaped out of that. So here's my question. What motivated these disciples to believe in Jesus? They were all Jews. They believed that God was unapproachable. What motivated them to believe in Jesus, who was just as worthy of worship as Yahweh? What motivated these disciples to leave their parents, to go to Persia, India, Russia, Ethiopia, and beyond, and die a horrible death? What motivated this ridiculous devotion? Whew. Any questions? Good. Let's keep going. Let me tell you what motivated John. John chapter 20, verse 30. He says this, "Now Jesus did many other signs." Remember, this is an eyewitness account. He's saying, now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of us Jewish disciples, which are not written in this book. So John is saying, I saw it. I was an eyewitness. I saw all the signs that he did. I saw him turn water into wine into Canaan. I saw him raise a Sadducee's son from the dead. I saw Lazarus, who had been dead for 3 days and should have been stinking, come back to life. I watched Peter take a sword, cut a dude's ear off. Jesus grabs it, puts the ear back on, and I even saw Jesus die with my own eyes. And then I talked to him 3 days later. And I didn't just see the ones I wrote down in this book. In fact, I saw so many other signs, and it wasn't just me who saw it, it was the disciples saw it. And in fact, I saw so many others. I do not have enough papyrus, because that's what they wrote on. I don't have enough scroll to write all of this down. I don't have the time to dictate it to my Greek scribe, because he did so many things that I saw with my eyes. And it wasn't just me who saw it, it was all the disciples. And he says in verse 31, so this is why I've written the book, but these are written so that you may what? Believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. So he turns around and he says that the reason I'm writing them down isn't just because I wanted a memoir. The reason I'm writing this, or I'm dictating this to my Greek translator, the English of the day, so that you, the whole world, might believe. But I don't want you to just believe, brother. I don't want you to just have faith, sister. I want you to believe, because I wouldn't believe it either until I saw it. But then I saw it. And he finishes and he says, and that by believing you may have life in his name. So John wrote this down because in his day, there were people who didn't see Jesus, who had never met Jesus. There were people who doubted Jesus. But John did see. And John did believe, and John's hope is that you, through his experience, will experience him in a way too, that you will be convinced that Jesus is God, that he rose from the dead. He's not simply telling us to believe, he's building a logical, reasonable, rational, empirical case to why we should believe in Jesus too. So what changed the disciples' minds? Because these disciples were Jews. What changed their minds that they should follow Jesus? I mean, the disciples believed in an unapproachable God known as Yahweh. What changed their minds that they were walking beside God who was approachable? The core belief of Judaism was that God the Creator was only of worship. What changed their mind that Jesus was worthy of worship? Each disciple spent the rest of their lives spreading the gospel. What changed their mind that living for Jesus was worth leaving their home? Everyone but John died a horrible death. What changed their mind that Jesus was worth dying for? And there's one singular fact in all of history that could have motivated that ridiculous devotion. And it was what they saw. They had a friend. They had a teacher. They had a rabbi that they watched be publicly executed naked on a cross. And they spoke to him in 3 days. That was the only thing that could have motivated this type of devotion. And see, John is writing an eyewitness account of what he saw. And I believe that the resurrection of Jesus is the only thing that could have possibly changed the minds of the disciples. There's not a possible way that they would have given everything to follow Jesus unless they actually saw it with their own eyes. The resurrection changed their minds. And here's my bottom line. No one dies for what they know is a lie. Then you're like, people die all the time for when they believe a lie. That's not what I'm saying. I get it. If you've studied cults, crazy cults, people believed that this was worth dying for. And they believed that if they drank the Kool-Aid, they'd all end up in heaven one day. Some of you are like, what do you mean Kool-Aid's bad? No, just there's poison in it. They believed it. They believed 100%. But if the disciples saw their rabbi be crucified and they never saw him again, do you think that they would believe? No. They would know that what Jesus was saying was a lie. So many people will die for a lie, but no one will die for what they know is a lie. No one will die for what they know is a lie. See, no one dies an obscure death in another country with no fame, no cameras, no hashtags, no memorial services, no ribbons on doors, for what they know is a lie. Not one disciple would have given their lives for a Jewish rabbi they saw die and never saw again. No one. So the next time you doubt, believe, but don't believe irrationally. Don't believe because your parents told you to. Don't believe because a preacher told you to. Believe because there is real evidence, real historical facts that every disciple spread the gospel and died, with the exception of John, because of what they saw. And no one would do that based upon what they know is a lie. So let me challenge you. Next time you doubt, look at the evidence. And let me give you a couple evidences here. I'm going to give you 3, okay? Like I said, we're going to go fast through these. These are deep. Here's the first evidence of why what they saw is real. So the gospel accounts, evidence 1, the gospel accounts base their claims on women, okay? And you may say, well, Pastor Landon, that sounds sexist. And I would say, you are right. That is very sexist. In the ancient world, it was extremely sexist. There was no such thing as feminism in ancient Rome. In ancient Rome, women could not vote. They could not own property. They could not hold political office. In many contexts of the ancient world, women were viewed as a man's property. Women could have no public influence. So if you were trying to convince the Roman Empire that Jesus is alive, would you base, if you're trying to come up with this conspiracy theory, would you base your entire gospel narrative based upon the claim of a woman in that day and age? Absolutely not, because no one would have believed a woman. But what does Matthew do in his eyewitness account? Verse 28 says, now after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, it's like, oh, there's Mary Magdalene, the other Mary, there's 2 of them, went to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for the angel of the Lord had descended from heaven and came back and rolled the stone and sat upon it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing was white as snow. So who do the gospel writers take their first eyewitness account based upon? A woman. Why would the gospel writers do this? Because maybe they were seeking to give an actual eyewitness account, and the only way to do that was to actually report what happened, even if it was based upon a woman. See, the evidence of the gospel accounts of the resurrection are not fiction or conspiracies, but documented facts. No one will create a conspiracy theory in that time based upon a woman. But the fact is, a woman really saw Jesus. So next time, ladies, you feel kind of devalued, like you don't have leadership in the church, remember that the first person to tell the whole world that Jesus was alive was a woman. Evidence 2. Non-Christian historians verify much of the gospel accounts. So many people will tell you, well, I mean, look, okay, so you're going to tell me that the Bible's true based upon the Bible? That's smart. But there's so many non-Christian historians from that time who base their historical record that actually verify what is said in the gospel. So there was a guy named Senator Tacitus of Rome. He was a political figure. He was under Emperor Domitian. He was a pagan. He did not believe in Jesus. He killed Christians. He verified in his letter that Jesus was a real man who died on the cross. He wrote this in 64 AD. Christus, the founder of the name, was put to death. She's talking about Jesus, was put to death by Pontius Pilate, the procurator of Judea in the reign of Tiberius, the emperor at the time. But the pernicious superstition, repressed for a time, broke again, was not only through Judea, where the mischief originated, but through the city of Rome also. So Senator Tacitus, a pagan who did not believe in Jesus, verifies that there was a man named Jesus who died under Pontius Pilate during the reign of Tiberius, which is what the gospel accounts confirm, that Jesus was a real man who died on a real cross under Pontius Pilate during the year of Emperor Tiberius. That was Senator Cornelius Tacitus, a pagan. He did not believe in Jesus. Flavius Josephus, a Jew, wrote in his book, Jewish Antiquities, that Ananus, the high priest, convened the judges of the Sanhedrin and brought them before a man named James, the brother of Jesus, who was called the Christ, and certain others. He accused them of having transgressed the law and ordered them to be stoned. So this confirms, first thing, that Jesus was a real man. Remember, Josephus was a Jew. He did not believe in Jesus, that he was God, but he believed that Jesus was a real man, and he confirms what the Bible says, that James was Jesus' half-brother. So, and this also confirms that in AD 62, when he wrote this letter, that there were still people following Jesus 30 years after it. And there were others as well. My point is that non-Christians verify the best historical record we have. Non-Christians verify that Jesus was a real man who died on a real cross. So the burden of proof is not on us Christians, it's on the world, the secular world, to prove to us that the historical accounts that are found in this Bible are not true, because much of it has been verified by non-Christians. So evidence one, the gospel writers base their claim on women. Why would they do that? Because it really happened. Evidence two, non-Christian historians verify much of the gospel accounts. Why would they do that? Because it really happened. And then evidence three, the gospel spreads unbelievably quickly because of the disciples' belief. So finally, there's a Roman historian. His name is Pliny the Young. Cool, that's great. He's a Roman historian. He writes a letter to the emperor of Rome at the time, and he said by AD 100, there were so many Christians in Rome. You can go and read this for yourself. There were so many that the Roman temples were becoming empty. And now, remember where Jerusalem's compared in comparison to Rome, okay? If you're not good in geography, that's like as far as Havana, Cuba is from Boston, Massachusetts, okay? There's no cars at this time. There's no social media. There's no way to get a word from there unless somebody takes the gospel to Rome. And in 70 years, Rome is being run by Christians. The temples are empty. How did that spread so quickly? How did that happen? It's 1,400 miles away. How could that belief travel so fast? And it wasn't that just like, oh, there was a man named Jesus. It was the exact belief that Jesus died on the cross. He was the same God as Yahweh. He was the king of the Jews. The same belief was being found in Rome as it was in Jerusalem. Why did that happen? Because you cannot stop the disciples spreading the gospel unless you killed them. You see, friends, next time you doubt, look at the evidence. A tomb was empty. The women reported it. Non-Christian historians confirm much of the details, and it spread like wildfire because people were willing to die for not what they believed, what they saw. They didn't have an illogical faith. They didn't just have faith. They had a reasonable faith, and no one dies for what they know is a lie. Those closest to Jesus believed. Those closest to Jesus died because those closest to Jesus put their fingers in the nail-scarred hands. Thomas said, I'm not going to believe that Jesus rose from the dead until I feel it myself. So Jesus walks through a wall and he's like, hey, Thomas. Yeah, you see me now? No, you can't see me. Yes, you can. There's a hole. Put your finger in it. And he's like, I believe. And then Thomas goes and dies a horrible death because of what he saw. See, I don't want you to believe just because I'm telling you to believe. I don't want you to believe just because, oh, it felt really good when we sang Resurrecting, and I just believe that. Take that to college with you. I want you to believe because Matthew, John, Peter, Paul, Mattathias, James, Simon, and Thaddeus saw, believed, and almost all of them, with the exception of John, died for it. And no one dies for what they know is a lie. Because if we believe not based upon feelings, not based upon emotions, not based upon blind faith, then we will be able to stand up when someone more credible than me, more trustworthy than your small group leaders, and more convincing than your parents say, Jesus isn't God, it's just another conspiracy theory. Because one day it will happen. It may not happen while you're in high school. It may not happen while you're here in the Bible Belt. But one day your faith will be challenged. And someone will show you some seemingly credible evidence for why the Bible is a myth, why the resurrection is a farce, and why Jesus coming back from the dead is just another conspiracy theory. But that crisis of faith does not have to be the end of your faith. Why? Because we didn't just blindly believe. Because we see the evidence, and we know that no one dies for what they know is a lie. So my question then for all of us in the room today is, will we live for what we believe to be true? Not blind belief, not illogical faith, not emotionalism, but because we believe based upon what we see in this room and what we've seen in our friends' life and the person who told us. And that was the gospel writers that have been verified historically, who died and who had skin in the game for what they saw. Because Jesus isn't just trying to change our minds. He's trying to change our hearts. He's trying to change the world's hearts. And he's trying to change every single doubter in the room's heart too. But we must live for what we know and what we believe and what we see in the evidence to be true. That Jesus Christ is alive. Change my mind.